Okay, so last time we left, just to recap, you are recovering divorcee.
Not yet.
Not yet, but in
Mm,
process.
right.
And we talked on Thursday or Friday?
Thursday, yes.
Okay, on Thursday, and talked about, you know, your need for food, and now that you're not dealing with the waves of pain and detachment, that this is a great time for you to work on your diet, lose some weight. And I basically said, no, oh, we're gonna face the pain, right? And the
Right.
challenge I left with you, and this is the challenge I leave with everybody, is hold yourself accountable to be truthful with your eating in regards to hunger, right? Only eat when there's true hunger and only enough for hunger to go away. And I also said to you, give yourself the freedom to eat without shame and guilt so that you get a true, authentic understanding of how your body's reacting, right?
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
So tell me how it went.
Um, it went good. It went bad. It was very eye-opening.
Can you explain what you mean by eye opening for you?
I wasn't aware of my patterns. I wasn't aware that, oh, this is the time of day where I tend to want some, a Diet Coke or something,
Stimulating.
something stimulating or salty or whatever. Um, I didn't realize how fast I was eating. I did find out that when I slowed down, when I really enjoyed what I was eating, then I ate a lot less.
I'm going to repeat that. When you slowed down and thoroughly enjoyed what you were eating, that you felt satisfied on less.
Yes, that was huge to me.
It's a big deal. And you know what? That's pretty much how everybody feels. Unless they're compensating for something. Unless they're judging what they're eating. If you judge what you eat, you're so screwed. You're so screwed you're going to overeat it. There's like that's a guarantee if you're judging what you're eating. If you're judging the pleasure, you're not going to get it. How did that feel? The freedom to really enjoy your food without having that guilt and shame of it.
It sounds like it would be wonderful. It sounds like it would be fabulous. But to be honest, there was some times when I it just was so way different than what I was used to that I kind of had to just fight the feeling to
Yeah.
shovel it
The
in.
condition of it, yeah. And those are the times you probably overate.
It is. It was.
Wow. I didn't learn this in school. They don't teach this in science.
No?
No, they don't. I didn't. This is something you just came aware of just by your own experience, didn't you?
Yeah.
You're pretty
I
much
knew
everybody that I
it was
work with.
strange. You hear you're supposed to chew your food thoroughly to get all the nutrients out of it, and you're supposed to take more time and not focus on TV and focus on your food and all that. But I never understood why or that I don't know.
Well, how do you do that when you're judging the food you're eating? I mean, that's like, really? Like, you're supposed to be able to sit there and chew it and enjoy it when there's so much shame surrounding it? Whoever says that without backing it with the evidence of what I just described, they don't really understand it themselves. Otherwise, they'd say, here, the only way you're going to be able to thoroughly be present with your food is if you don't judge it. There's no route to pleasure with food if there's shame and judgment around it. You have to eat 5 times as much to feel sated. And you don't, and it's not just sated, you're mutilated. You can't get any more in. So your actually brain isn't even registering pleasure because it's being conflicted in the brain with shame and guilt. So brain wise, it's not even registering. Get rid of the shame and guilt, all of a sudden the brain is responding to the pleasure.
Never thought of it that way.
Well, would you say that matches your experience that you just observed?
It does. It really does. It's most of my eating has been mindless.
You mean full of shame and guilt?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty much the entire diet industry. It's like if we fear food enough, if we fear it enough, if we can tell people all the bad things about it enough, that'll keep them from eating it. And in reality, that's like an attractor. So when it's like when you go through this round of the protocol, when we actually get to the point where you and I are agreeing that you're ready for it, which will be sometime in the future, right? Sometime near future. You're going to have to go through the binging or the gorging process. And by nature of being allowed to do it, in general, people don't like it. They don't have the same impulse. They don't have the same binge impulse. It's not the same. Why? It's the same food they normally binge on. But why is it that when you give them permission, they don't like it? They don't want to. They don't have the same euphoria. They assume, a lot of times what you'll hear when people, you're like, yes, you have to go through this gorging process. The first thing people do is think, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. That's like you're giving me permission to binge, right? And then when it comes time and you say, okay, you're going to start your loading tomorrow, you're going to go, oh my God, you're kidding me. And then you're faced with the trauma of self-mutilating with food without the bias of judgment, and it takes on a whole nother meaning. I would say in general, the majority of binge eaters who are allowed to binge through the actual protocol's loading process, they're disgusted. They don't recognize the difference. Personally, there's a connection to me with guilt and shame. So anyways, when you're ready, you're gonna have to force feed yourself highly fattening foods, and you're not gonna want to do it. And you're gonna be once again surprised by the power of grace and acceptance, because that's really what that loading is. When the way I teach it is freedom to eat what you want within a period of time, trying to get as much fat as you can, no shame and guilt. And you'll find that there's nothing that really sounds that good. The whole brain chemistry changes. And I'm basically trying to get you to do that prior to that experience. I want you to live for a good 2 weeks in this altered state of brain chemistry. What it's exposing is all of the fraud and fallacy and fear and shame and guilt that's driving the nutrition industry, nutraceuticals, the diet industry, diet culture. It's all founded on fear, avoidance of shame and guilt, which essentially feeds people's overeating. So there really needs to be a major shift in how practitioners are aiding patients like yourself. Otherwise, the science behind the nutrition is useless, right? The intelligence behind eating. And I talked about that in Weight Loss Apocalypse. Have you gone through Weight Loss Apocalypse yet?
I did, not in the past week though.
Okay, that's fine. But do you remember where I said, okay, once you establish this functional eating that doesn't have the bias of, emotional extremism or insecurity, it is important to eat intelligently. It really is important to be conscious of what's in the food that you're eating. But you know what? There is more power in your beliefs about the food than what's in the food, to be honest with you. That is the placebo effect. That is, by and large, the mystery of science. How you believe and the power of your beliefs on your brain and your body's reaction to whatever you're using as a stimulus. So if we can change your beliefs around food, we can actually allow the food to be authentically received in the body. So now you're getting what you need from the food without the extremism physically in response. So in general, actually, what you'll find and what we find is that when people aren't afraid of food, their body isn't as susceptible to gain. If you're fearing food in shame and in guilt, you're prone to inflammation with the food that you're eating. Do you recall a time in your life where you didn't really diet, you didn't have any fears, you gave yourself freedom to eat what you wanted, and you really didn't have the same feeling of vulnerability to gain?
Absolutely, yes.
I know it's very clear in your mind, isn't it? And how many times have you ever thought, God, I wish I could just go back to that. I wish I could go back to that. Well, for you to go back to that, you're going to have to diminish your fear, shame, guilt, and anxiety surrounding food. And isn't that essentially what I'm asking you to do with this practice?
It is.
And was that what you became aware of this week? Or since Thursday? Is that what you became aware of with your practice?
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah. So what obviously this practice, I think you need more time.
I think so too. I'm kind of surprised to hear myself say that, but it's a practice. You're right.
Isn't it refreshing?
It is. It's just it's I don't know what the words are for it, but it's strange to see that about yourself and approach it in a different way like that. And I still, even today, I realize how much of my eating is not need-based. It's what's in my head. And
so it's not physically needy, it's emotionally needy.
It's
so
probably 75% of it, yes.
Okay, so if we get rid of that 75%,
then I'm going to be a very thin woman.
On your own. Well, your body will naturally just be itself. And I think that's the most important thing here too, is that when you observe your need for food, should we place blame on your body?
No.
It's actually done a very good job. So you have to, and like I said when we first met, there is some beliefs that we have to really look at, because your behavior with food is directly tied to shame and guilt over your weight, right? However, your behavior with food started when you weren't heavy, right?
It did.
So that gets us a little further. So obviously we could say your neediness with food at this point is directly conditioned by your judgment and shame of being overweight. But the trigger to eat came from an outer stimulus that felt, and that could be the divorce, what brought you to divorce. That makes sense, to where you need something to medicate. And that's, food is easy for people. It's something we don't judge, right? It's a pleasure we don't judge so much, unless you're fat. Right? And so unfortunately, you needed that pleasure. You accepted the weight gain. But yet you held tight to the standards of, I have to be thin to be valuable. So ultimately, we have to question the initial belief of, are you capable of change in your life? Are you capable of this? After the fact, you're saying yes, but during the time you couldn't, right?
Right.
And the next part is, obviously the reasoning behind eating, the way you came to the decision to eat as pain relief, is because you accepted the weight gain. You knew it when you were eating that you were going to gain weight.
That's true. You're right.
Okay, so that's that. There was a second. At some point, you're in pain. You're trying to find a way to escape it. You're not going to drink because we judge that. There's so many boundaries that you've put yourself within that don't allow you to express, or you didn't know how to express it. So your escape route was an easy thing, which was with food. It's a cultural thing. It's an easy access. However, it requires justification and rationalization, especially for someone who has an ego with being thin. So you are drawn to justify and rationalize eating as pain medication because of the ego behind your being thin. If you didn't really give a crap about being thin and it wasn't a source of your security, would you have been drawn to justify and rationalize eating?
No.
Say that again.
No. I wouldn't have.
Okay, so as we're working together, it would be to your disadvantage if I told you by losing weight, you're going to feel better about yourself. Because wouldn't you agree that if I said by losing weight, you will feel better about yourself, that I am watering and fueling the seed for why you justified and rationalized eating as a narcotic?
That's true.
Okay, so that's the last thing I'm going to do. So in order for you to really resolve the pain that occurred in the beginning, and that's the hardest part, that pain still exists. It has never been resolved. You've never vocalized it. So by stripping away this body image, thin is better justification to overeat, you're forced to look at your pain unless you want to escape it another route. So then you could probably go into other forms of addiction, right?
Absolutely.
You could clean your house like 10 times a day. That might make it go away. Do you know people like that? Shopping. Go buy another purse. That would be a great transfer. Why don't we try that one? Well, you're hearing me say this, right? Isn't the obvious resolution to actually just get in front of the pain and deal with that pain and allow the pain to come in, get to know that pain? Because inside that pain is the resolution to your beliefs around marriage, which is ultimately a resolution, if we go even deeper, to who are you and how important are you and what is your worth individually.
Okay, dumb that down for a little bit.
Well, once we peel all of this protection, right, your security blanket, right? I'm pulling a security blanket off of you, right? Saying, look, you now have what, 40 extra pounds?
Yes.
That you gained in a year?
2.
Okay, 2 years. That really isn't the problem, right? The only reason why you're overweight is because you've been using food to justify and you've been justifying rationalizing food because you think you can lose the weight. And all of that is founded on this idea that being thin makes you more valuable.
True.
Okay, so that system of thought isn't the problem, actually. It's a consequence. Don't you agree that anybody who thinks that being thin makes them more valuable, they're hiding the truth? There's something wrong there.
Yes.
I would agree. And have you ever been around people who actually believe that because they're thin, they're better than you?
Absolutely.
I know, and isn't it just like, really? I feel bad for those people because they're obsessive compulsive about exercise and food, and they're obsessing about nutrition. They'll tell you everything that's bad in the food you're eating. Right?
It's true, yes.
And they're in the closet. Somewhere, right? That is a reflection of just what they're using to feel good about themselves. So if you get rid of what they're using, right, then how do they feel good about themselves? What's left? So basically, if I were to draw the line here of like how you are where you're at today, it's obviously that you at some point thought you were better because you were thinner. Otherwise, you wouldn't have justified and rationalized eating.
I was one of those people, yes.
It's okay to admit, it's understandable, right? It is forgivable. There is logic behind it. Don't you agree? If you are insecure with who you are and you don't have a good sense of your worth, you're going to latch on and attach to something valuable that you think you have. So society, let me rephrase this. The addicted form of our addicted society, addicted to validation. This parts of society that are addicted to validation, right? You became a part of that.
I did, yes.
Okay. And it's understandable because you're very vulnerable to being programmed by that if you are insecure with yourself around other people. Right?
Right.
You have to be secure with yourself in the surroundings you're in. If you're insecure with who you are in your surroundings, you're going to find something about your surroundings that makes you feel secure. So it's very easy to say, hey, I'm thin. At least I got that going for me. I'm valuable. I'm comfortable. Right? That is understandable. That's why I'm like, don't feel bad. Don't feel guilty. Don't be ashamed, because that's very understandable. Okay? However, that is the only reason why it's predictable that you went to food when your marriage crumbled. Because you could justify and rationalize eating and by losing the weight back. So if weight is your ego, you're susceptible to using food as a narcotic. And dieting as the anti-narcotic. Does that make sense? Okay. So if we remove that, that's very predictable. You're left with the pain of your marriage.
Okay.
That's what I meant by, okay, once we strip all of this, you're left with what you were running from anyways.
Right. So you have to deal with it at some time.
Yes. You're going to have to face your marriage and why is it so painful? And the one thing haven't you learned through life is if there's pain going into it, you need to be in the pain itself to understand why it's there. That's the best way to get to know it, is within the pain itself. But unfortunately, our brains are wired to turn and run. But we're also conscious beings, so we don't have to. We have choice. That's our free will. That's what makes humans different from animals. That's the difference. That's where your responsibility comes in. We could say, yes, that sugar is a narcotic, but really your free will overrides all of that. It's the truth. If you honestly think that sugar is controlling you, that's the saying, basically, I have no free will. And you know what? So be it. Stay where you're at. Right? But at some point, if you're wanting to make change, you're going to have to recognize that free will is your way out. Right? So when you're going into pain, the key here is to have the free will to know that there is a way for you to look at it that brings you peace within the pain itself.
Okay. Now I'm starting to understand it.
Yeah, so the whole weight loss thing is so not important, right? This is obvious, your eating behavior, it's so freaking obvious. At this point, we consider and go, okay, yeah, this all makes sense, but none of this is important. Losing a pound isn't going to change the pain of your marriage, right? And your behavior with food was a way for you to not have to deal with the pain of the marriage, right?
Right.
So if we stop justifying and rationalizing, okay, well, if we stop judging your food based on this old ego of bullshit, right? Then all of a sudden your need for food is less. So now you're going to have to face your pain. And by going in that pain, you're going to actually get to know it. And what you're going to find is that going into pain, and I think this is a real common mistake with people who are in the process of recovery and they get stuck here. I hear this with therapists I work with. I hear this with people who've gone through thousands and thousands of dollars of therapy. You just breathe through that pain. You let the pain come in and you let it go out. And we did talk about that in our last session. You've got to be able to go into that pain. However, that is the opportunity for you to logically look at how that pain is being triggered. Don't just sit there and feel it and let it go. Get in there and get your work done.
Give me a for example.
Okay, so it's nighttime, you're alone, and all of a sudden you start to have these feelings, right? Of I hate him, he took everything from me, or whatever it is. And you start to have this pain. You need to actually think, why does this hurt so bad? What was I expecting? Why did I hold him to that standard? And is that even realistic? I mean, you have to start asking questions. You have to guide yourself through the understanding of your pain. And the guidance requires, first and foremost, that you're not going into the pain to validate your pain. You know what that is? That's blaming someone else for your pain.
Oh, sure.
Going into pain to validate it. Yeah, I'm in pain, damn it. Assholes. That's not what you do. You go into pain in humility, and you go into it in recognition that it's your pain, your cause of your own pain. It's no one else's pain. It is you to blame, and it's your beliefs that ultimately you're holding other people to. That is why you feel like you're a victim. So it's unfair to hold other people to your beliefs, which is why you're in pain. Otherwise, you're in pain until they uphold to your beliefs.
Which isn't realistic.
Well, it's not, yes, the truth, what you just said, not realistic. That means it's never going to happen. And no, is it fair? Is that fair? Yeah. For example, in college, I had some very traumatic sexual experiences, which you could definitely look at and say were rape. However, for me to recover, I had to go back into the mind of that experience and have grace and forgiveness and understanding for the boys. They were 19-year-old boys. They were someone's sons, right? I had to go in and actually get into their minds to understand, why would someone do that? And make sense of it. That way, I wasn't the victim of rape. They were the victim of their own minds. I just so happened to be a body, right? That was easy to take advantage of, right? Because I had no bearings about, I had no, what's the word? I didn't have any idea about reality. Okay. So you could look at, basically, let's just use your marriage, for example, because this is the most recent traumatic event for you. When you went into your marriage, did you really, really know and love your husband?
Not like I should have.
No, well, you can't love your husband if you don't love yourself. How are you to know what you love about someone if you don't really know what you love about yourself? Right?
True, yes.
When we talked about, you go into marriage with the love of the idea of marriage and companionship, but are completely naive to what true companionship is about.
That's true.
So when we say go into the pain, I'm actually talking you through it right now. These are the thoughts that you have to mend. I didn't know. It was unfair of me to hold him to that. Obviously, if I continue to think that that's how he should have been, I'm going to be in pain.
That's helpful. That helps process it.
Yes, and this is why you go into pain. All I'm telling you is once you have that pain and you welcome it in as part of the consequence of your beliefs, and I think that's really important. Pain is a consequence. If you don't have the consequence of pain, you're never going to evolve. You'll never question your beliefs. You'll always think you're right. So isn't it common for people who don't face pain and avoid pain, they are people who tend to think that they're perfect?
Never thought of it like that.
They never take accountability for their shit. It's always everybody else's blame, including your body. Food is to blame. My body's to blame. My husband's to blame. My mother's to blame. Her mom's to blame, damn it. Culture's to blame. You know whose fault this is?
It's our own.
It's Obama's fault. Oh, I'm so glad you laughed at that, because I think it's hilarious, actually, that everybody blames Obama. So why not just get on the hating Obama train? We should just blame everything on him, and then, you know what, move forward. Because as soon as he out of the office, then everything's going to be perfect. Uh-huh. So now you get it.
I get it.
Okay.
I didn't realize that's where it stemmed from, though.
Yeah, well, you have to go into pain. And I don't know your marriage. I truly believe that you love him.
I do.
And I truly believe he loves you too. But the problem with this is there's conditions. You have had made conditions and he's been opposingly conditioned. So you could say, yes, I could go back and I could live in that marriage and we could make it work, but he might not be able to get rid of the conditions. So that's where acceptance comes in. Don't you agree?
I would. I didn't think of it that way, but you make a strong case.
Well, strong case relative to your experience.
Yes, it is. I just didn't. It's new thoughts to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you thought what would happen if you start to date again, really think about that. What would you look for in a spouse or in a partner?
I haven't even gotten that far.
Well, I think this is really important. But and more than that, how would you present yourself?
Not in the way I'd want to yet.
Not in a
Because
way.
I know I need some growth myself.
Yeah, well, when you're ready.
Uh-huh.
When you're ready. I'm making an assumption that when you're ready, obviously I do believe that you're taking the time you should have when you were young, before you got married.
I agree with you, yes.
Yeah, and that's a very important personal growth. When you feel personally secure, and I know that's what you're seeking with this, you want to feel really strong about your identity because that's how you want to present yourself. And you don't want to be influenced by other people's opinion. You just want to be yourself. And you want whoever it is to be attracted to the truth of who you are, right? There's no games, there's no codependency. It's the real deal, like a best friend, right? You know those girlfriends we have that are like, they know everything about you. You can tell them anything. You don't have to hide anything. You confide in them. Isn't that a partnership?
It is, yes.
So essentially, wouldn't you want that in terms of a sexual partner?
Absolutely.
Agreed. So one thing that I do with my husband, I got married really young too. And I actually went through my awful period of time, which I obviously recovered from. I was married at the time. And I actually left my husband for a year after I came out of my awakening. Lived in a different state, went to a different school, and we stayed married. Because I loved him, but I needed my personal growth. So I actually went through this with marriage. And I've often thought during the 17 years that I've been married, which I know is not very long, but it's still, it's 17 years. I want to be who I would be if I was dating. If I were to, how would I treat my boyfriend? How would I treat someone that I want to date? Do you know what that's done to my sex life? It's really awesome because we're still dating.
That's true. That's
Changes a lot of things, doesn't it? It's like I would send a dirty picture to my boyfriend. Okay. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
I'm married, so none of you teenagers need to be doing that, okay? You know what I mean? So something stupid like that, like the chase. We're still chasing each other. Because that is a view that I take. I'm like, okay, if I were to get divorced with my husband, how would I behave with someone I'm dating? And why wouldn't I do that with the existing husband that I have? But you realize to do that, I have to be independent of him.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, It's not necessarily a point. I guess it is.
Well,
I guess it's an example of what you're developing right now, which is what you didn't have developed with your marriage. That honestly did something right. You were doing something right. However, it just, if I could have told you 5 years ago, treat your husband the way you would someone you were dating. If you were divorced and now in the dating scene, how would you treat this person?
it'd be differently.
Oh, it wouldn't it? I know. It's just a frame of mind. Frame of mind changes everything. You would be more forgiving. You would let him be himself. Right? I mean, you let him. I mean, if you're dating someone, you're independent. You have your friends. You have your nights. You have your things. You don't give yourself up when you're dating.
A good point.
So learn from those things. And I honestly think maybe that's the development you need right now, is get a sense of your independence. Get a sense of your worth. Get a sense of your ability. And what's going to happen when you go back into the dating scene to find companionship, whether it's with your ex-husband or with someone new, you're going to be seeking someone who is also independent. Because you want the partnership to have co-independence.
That's true. I never thought of it that I keep saying that, don't I?
That's
But I
okay.
didn't think that way.
There's a reason you paid money to have this conversation.
Yeah, no,
Isn't it exciting? It's
it is.
exciting.
It is. Well, you mentioned something just a few minutes ago. You said something about being secure with yourself. And if there was one thing that I'd want to work with on my own is having that self-security, not having to look to somebody else for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair to the other person,
Mm-mm.
and you need to develop it yourself.
Yep. Amen, sister. And, the question is then, how does someone develop that? How do you develop self-worth? What should it be founded on?
That's the question of the day. I don't think I know the answer to that.
Well, let's think about the definition. What's the definition of self-worth?
How valuable am I?
Yes, but it's not in relation to something outside of yourself. So that's an important distinction. Self-worth is worth that is intrinsic to your character, to your spirit. When you look at your children, you can see it in them. They don't have to prove it. Why don't you have that? What do your parents see in you that makes them go, "Oh my God, my heart pitter-patters. This is a precious stone. Doesn't have to be changed, doesn't need to be chipped, doesn't need to be figured. Precious stone." You need to identify with that. For me, when I chose to start my life over, free from conditions, and that's what I mean. What I mean by conditions are free from beliefs that have hijacked my value. Okay, I was raised in a very strict religious environment that they identify you within the religion. They call you by the religion. It's culturally, I don't want to say the religion is not, it's a beautiful spiritual. There's spirituality that is very pure in it. However, the culture is very indoctrinating and very cultish, okay? I chose, if I were to stay alive, if I were to stay in this life, I did not want to be defined by any culture. I wanted to stay true to myself. And I had to re-identify with what that was. And how do I know that I am doing the right thing, right? Because don't you agree that part of what we're doing and what we're taught is that you need culture to tell you if you're doing things right or wrong.
True.
And then you know if you're good or bad in relation to their thoughts and beliefs and patterns of rules. Is that not what we teach?
It is.
And it's so messed up. It's so messed up because it's not self-worth. That's religious worth. That's education worth. That's your body image worth. Right? So what I had to come to grips with, if I wanted to continue to live, is I wanted to define my worth from the truth of my integrity. The integrity of my truth is my bearings, and I'm going to trust that I am a good person, that I have good intentions, that I want happiness, and I want everybody to be happy. That feeling of happiness that I have, that's my worth. That's a very worthy feeling. And am I not expressing it to you?
Yes.
You are no less worthy than I am. You don't need to prove that to anybody. You just need to accept that. And you need to accept it in the body you live in.
Do you know, it's really hard to think of you having gone through that. I mean, I look at you and you have so many qualities that I wish I had. You're very self-assured. You speak with a lot of clarity. You have really strong convictions, and they're based on truth. It's hard for me to. I'm older than you. It's hard for me to compare myself to you.
Well, don't you agree, for you to have that discernment, for you to recognize those qualities, don't you have to have on some level a receptor, an awareness of those qualities within yourself?
I have an awareness, and I know it just seems like it's so deep. And I kick myself because I'm like, why didn't I let that out years ago?
Well, it's very understandable why you wouldn't let that out years ago. You were afraid. Wouldn't anybody do the same thing? Under the same circumstance? With the same fears?
Well, but we all react differently. I mean, I wish I would have.
Okay, I'm talking about you. Are you telling me that you knew better and didn't do better?
No, I did not.
Okay, because that's what you're judging yourself by right now. I should have done better. Well, did you know better at the time?
No.
So it's unfair for you to judge yourself and judge your past based on what you've learned from your mistakes up until this point.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so if we look at your past, we could forgive everything. It's all of what you've done up until this point has been true to your integrity of what you're aware of. Can we ask more of that? No, you couldn't have gone more. You had a learning curve and you've learned a lot. It's unfair for you and everybody out there to judge yourself by what you've learned after the fact. If you had known what you know now, if you knew the outcome of your behaviors, if you understood the consequence from inside of it, you wouldn't repeat the same mistake.
True.
Unfortunately, people do make the same mistake because they don't necessarily understand their behavior. They don't know what's driving it, so they don't necessarily have an understanding of how to change. Right?
Right.
And this is where therapy comes in handy. Right? This is where having a really good friend to confide in becomes really healthy, because at least you have some help from outside of your own cycles of thinking to maybe try something new. So my whole point is to accept that you've done the best you could under the circumstance. And it's not fair for you to hold yourself to what you understand today. However, it's not okay for you to continue to live as if you are 14 years old when you have the knowledge you have today. So you're allowed to say, oh my gosh, I would do things so different. Okay, well then let's start today. Do things different today as if you're getting that fresh start.